Welcome, all of you. I want to extend a huge, warm welcome to all of you, whether you are painting for the very first time with us, or whether you have done hundreds and hundreds of paintings with Creatively Uncorked. My name is Josiah, and I will be your artist for today. The painting that we're doing today, you can see it up here in the top left of your screen, this Bighorn Sheep at the Grand Canyon. It's a really beautiful painting. I have a lot of great memories with national parks and state parks, so that's why I chose this painting for this evening. If you have any great stories about any national park, but especially the Grand Canyon, go ahead and leave those in the comment section. That's also where, if you have any questions or comments for me, that's where you can leave those, okay? Because I know right now we're doing this virtually. I can't see you guys, so that's a good way to kind of bridge that gap. It makes it a little bit easier for me to interact with you guys and teach to you guys, okay? Let's go over our materials for the painting today. So we have our colors here. You can see it on that little screen there. We are using white paint today, black, phthalo blue, orange, and a warm yellow. So get those set up. And then we have our canvas, and I just pre-sketched the image on there with pencil. So take a moment to do that. And then we have our brushes here. So today I'll be using a small round brush and a 1/2-inch filbert brush. So a filbert brush is just one of the ones with the curved top there. But if you have any other brushes that you are more comfortable with, go ahead and grab those too, okay? These are just the two that I am going to be using today. Now, we make everybody that paints with us here at our studio join us in taking the Creatively Uncorked Brush Pledge. And while we can't be together in person, I would just ask that you all join me in taking that pledge today, okay? So grab your brushes, hold them up in the air, and repeat after me. I will not let paint dry my brushes.
I will not let paint dry my brushes.
When I am not using my brushes, I will put them in my water cup.
Not using my brushes, I'll put them in my water cup.
Awesome, thank you. That is just to ensure that those brushes get to create many and many paintings before they have to retire. The other materials that we'll need is a water cup and a paper towel. That's just to make sure that our colors are not mixing when we don't want them to mix, okay? So we can get our brushes cleaned in between steps. Now, some of you might be painting with one of our art kits to go. I just want to show you what that looks like if you have not picked one up yet. So these can get, and let me switch the camera view here. So these can get picked up at our studio or shipped right to you. Looks like a pizza box. And when you flip it open, you have the written instructions to the painting. So here they're doing this spring truck. You get the canvas with the sketch done on it. You get a pack of brushes. And you get all of the colors, all of the paints that you'll need. Now, the paints that we use at the studio, and if you got one of our art kits to go, you'll be using the same type as I am. These are non-toxic, water-soluble acrylic paints. So non-toxic just means that they're safe for kids. Water-soluble means that we will be using the water as a way to thin out the paint. But also, if you get on your clothing and don't want it there, go ahead and douse it in water, and it will most likely come out right away. But you will probably want to be wearing your dirtiest clothes right now, okay? So don't be wearing your nicest outfit. We have 2 rules here at Creatively Uncorked. And I know you're not painting with us in our studio, but these are more just pro tips than house rules, okay? So I want to share these with you guys as well. Rule number 1 is have fun. We like to say here that we do fun art, not fine art. So while this painting might not be something that you look back at years and years from now, we do hope that it creates a memory that will stick with you for a long time, okay? So try to enter into that fun mindset and don't be too hard on yourself. And that brings us right into rule number 2, which is no negativity. We have all the rest of our day to be negative. Right now, it's a beautiful sunny day outside, and we are doing art, okay? So we can relax. And if sometimes this might take a few additional things just to help us feel like we can really relax and leave all that negativity aside. So if you want to take a moment, take a few deep breaths, make yourself a cup of tea like I did, grab a snack, whatever it is for you. Turn on some background music. Go ahead and do that. Set the scene for yourself so that you can really enter into this painting, okay? And now, you guys are all watching on one of our Facebook pages or on YouTube. But soon we're going to be switching these all onto Zoom, okay? So if you want to continue joining in on these painting classes, go ahead and go to our website at creativelyuncorked.com, where you can see what upcoming paintings we have, and you can purchase a ticket either with that art kit to go, or just the ticket with the link to the Zoom meeting, okay? And I'm really excited for this opportunity because it means that I can see you guys, and you can hit the button on your keyboard and ask me a question, and I will actually be able to hear it and see you guys. Because that's something I really miss, is having that in-person, or at least verbal, being able to hear and see you guys. I miss that connection, okay? So I'm excited for the Zoom meetings, but make sure that you get on that if you want to join us for some of those, okay? Now, let's go ahead and get started. And one more quick reminder that there is that comment section if you need to ask any questions or want to interact with me at all. I'll be checking that whenever I get a chance. So we're going to start with our the mountains here, the canyon, because we want to try to avoid taking too many breaks where we have to just pause completely. And so if we do this down here, and then we move up to the top, then by the time we come back here and add all the detail, it should have dried, okay? So that's one strategy if you don't want to leave the artistic zone. The format of tonight's painting is that we're going to basically color block everything and then add some detail on top, which is a really good formula for doing a painting, for specific types of paintings. So I'm grabbing some water. Again, this is the tool that we'll be using to thin out the paint. So I'm taking some water and mixing some white off to the side. And now, my paint palette normally gets really messy, but this time I'm going to try to be a little bit more organized. So join me in doing that. And this is because we will want all the colors that we use. We'll want them later when we get to the final step, okay? So we're going to start by pulling some of our white off to the side, and we're adding that water to it. And we're adding just a little bit of blue. Whenever we are mixing paints, keep in mind that the darker color carries more weight. So that just means that a little dot of blue is going to make this white a lot different, okay? So start with the smallest amount you can, and then go ahead and darken it up. All right, so we have that really light blue there. And we're going to start with this backmost section of the canyon. Now, it took me a while to figure out how to paint the Grand Canyon because it is a very complex subject to paint. But I came up with this idea of doing the 3 layers to it. And I definitely channeled some of my love for the Roadrunner cartoon right here in this mountain. All those really tall ones that you don't really see in the Grand Canyon, but you get the idea. So it's like this little tower where Wile E. Coyote would always run off. So we're just filling this in now. And if you have not painted a whole bunch, just a quick 101 on how to use this paintbrush, okay? How to get a fine edge there. So what we do is we fill it with paint, and then we're going to press it into our canvas so that the hairs on the brush just fan out to the edges there. And when they fan all the way out to the edge of the line that you want it at, that's where you can drag it. So what that does is it's pressing all of the paint out to that end there, and it lets you get a really nice solid line. Now, if the paint is not gliding across, if it's dragging, make sure you add a little bit more water and that you're using plenty of paint. It should go nice and smooth over the surface, and it should fill all of the canvas. So we shouldn't be seeing the threads in the canvas. We shouldn't be seeing those. Now, one of the other inspirations for this painting, as you may have noticed, is Van Gogh's painting style. I had the opportunity to do one of those for our studio, and I really liked the technique. So I wanted to try it on another painting. So we'll get to that later with these lines. But the key to painting like Van Gogh is to find the shapes of the subject matter and really play on those. So you guys have all seen Starry Night with the swirly sky. He took those swirls and just continued that shape. So with this, we'll be using a slightly different shape, but it's the same concept. So we have filled in that backmost mountain, or canyon, with that light blue. And again, I said I'm going to try to keep my palette a little bit cleaner. So we're going to leave that light blue so we have it later when we want it. And then just wipe off the excess paint on the side of your plate. We don't need to wash it right away because we're going to be just using another shade of blue. But just wipe off any excess paint so we don't have a whole bunch of that. And now we're going to mix a blue that's almost as dark as this one. So pull a little bit of your phthalo blue off to the side. And we'll add a little scoop of white to it. So basically, these are our three main colors. So you want them to all be different from each other now that we can see all three of them. You want these to be a little bit different. We will be adding a bit of black in with that when we get to the darkest canyon layer. But you want this to be noticeably different, and you want it to be noticeably different from that one, okay? If you don't catch it right away, we can go ahead and touch it up later. But it's best to try to have these three look plenty different from the start. Now this is the color for the second layer. And one thing I tend to do in these paintings is I tend to rush along, okay? So leave a comment if you feel rushed. I will try to slow myself down so we can enjoy this moment even longer. As I'm looking at this painting now, I'm realizing it might look a little bit more like the Badlands than the Grand Canyon. But that's okay. I've spent more time in the Badlands myself. So we're just fanning out that brush, getting close to the edges. And now, I mentioned that we're going to find these shapes that we're going to try to repeat to mimic Van Gogh's painting style. And in this painting, the shape that we're going to be using over and over is this one right here. So it's flat on the top, and then we have this line that comes down, and it starts to kind of diagonal out, and then it flattens. So it's basically just a diagonal line with a bit of a curve to it, however you want to think of it. If you guys have never seen a bighorn sheep in person, they are very incredible creatures. And I felt like this was a good place to have one. Just chilling there at the top of the canyon, admiring the beauty, maybe wishing he could fly like the birds. Now sometimes I'm not so careful about my edges because I know that we'll come back over that with the other blue. So if that happens to you, no worries. We're just color blocking for now, so this is nice and easy. We're just staying within the lines, or not. So I'll take a short break real quick just to make sure that everybody's caught up. I don't want to rush anybody. But we'll just be moving on to that other blue in just a moment. At this point though, you should be able to just squint your eyes and already see those mountains coming into view. And if you're not seeing enough difference between these two, you can either lighten up the back one or add a little bit more blue into the closer one. How's it going for you guys? You following along? So I'm just leaving my paintbrush in the water in between steps here, cleaning it out. All right. One cool thing that I will be doing at the end of the painting here is doing a quick, like 15-minute painting that we will give away. I'm going to be doing a sea turtle. Here's the background. So you can watch me do that at the end if you stick around to the end of this. And then we will be giving it away. I'll think of some cool way to figure out which one of you to give it to, okay? But you are competing with people on YouTube and both of our Facebook pages. So there's a bit of a group. Although you guys are going to have to leave comments at some point for me to know who to pick. I do want to hear national park stories, okay? So if somebody has even just a favorite, the story could be as simple as, I saw this animal at this park. But leave some kind of story about an experience at any kind of park, but preferably national parks. One that just came to my mind that's pretty funny is I was in Colombia, South America, and I entered into a city park, and everyone in there was freaking out. There was some animal in there that was so exotic, and they all were looking at it and gathered around. And there were iguanas on all the trees, which I thought was pretty cool. But there was something that everyone was looking at. And I finally was able to get close and push through the people. And it was a dirty, raggedy old little squirrel. Because they don't really have too many squirrels there. So they were all in awe of this squirrel. So if you have some story, it can be as lame as... Never mind, it's not lame. It's a squirrel. It's a great story. But share some story that you had in some park. Now what we're going to do, it looks like my hand already started doing it before I decided to. We're going to fill in the nearest mountain with our darkest phthalo blue here. So we're not mixing any paints with it. We're just adding the phthalo blue in as it is. Now keep in mind that shape that I was talking about. So we have this curve right here. You can see it right here. It goes down, angles out, and levels out. I'm not really sure what kind of stone the Grand Canyon is. The way it's falling like this makes me think it is sandstone or something like that. It crumbles a lot, but don't quote me on that. So just be careful around those edges. We do want a sharp edge here now, although we can touch that up later, obviously. I'm going to hold this up just a little bit, just so you can see that there are some sharp angles. It almost looks wavy. So really create some of that texture there in that painting. And we're just going to fill in the whole rest of this close canyon here. If you would like, you can carry your paint over the sides of your canvas. You can wrap them all the way around, and then it'll look really nice on your wall, even without a frame. Although framing any painting goes a long way in transforming it into a masterpiece. Be careful at the top here not to go out of your line. Most places, that's okay. We can just kind of adjust the rest of the line to match it. Right here, though, we'd be cutting into the legs of this bighorn, really taking away from how it stands out. Leave any questions you have in the comments. And just a reminder that we are doing a quick live painting of a sea turtle at the end, and it will be given away to the person with the coolest park story, whatever that means to you. Now do try to thin out the paint in that area so that we don't have any areas where it's really globby or will take a long time to dry. So this has been a pretty easy painting so far, right? And that's the thing I really like about this painting. It doesn't, art doesn't have to be complicated. We're actually doing a pretty simple painting here, but I think it looks really cool. So let's finish up with those colors. Again, we have those 3 different shades of blue. We have our phthalo blue plus a whole lot of white, phthalo blue plus a smaller amount of white, and right here, just phthalo blue. And then we want to clean out that brush really good. If your water got way too blue, go ahead and get fresh water, because we're going to do the sky now, and we want this to be done in yellow and orange, and we don't want the blue in there, or we'd have a green-brown kind of sky. All right, let's go ahead and keep going then. I'm going to flip my painting upside down. Don't worry. I know it seems crazy. So what we're going to do here now is we're going to start with our yellow, or like a white yellow, and transition to our orange. So it's going to be a nice smooth transition. And this can be hard sometimes. But one cool thing is that you can find your own artistic style and just rock and roll with that, okay? So maybe you can't get yours perfectly smooth, but you find a really cool brush stroke. That's awesome. We are trying to mimic Van Gogh's style, at least in the canyons right now. If you turn out with more of a Van Gogh sky as well, that's all the better, okay? I'd actually be really curious to see how that turns out. And if you guys have done any photo editing or anything like that, you will know that one way to make your photos really pop is to crank that contrast meter all the way up. And that's something we can do in painting as well. So the lightest areas, like this canyon range here, and the very brightest part of the sky, the brighter we make that, the closer to white we make it, the more we raise that contrast. And vice versa is true as well. The more we darken up the darker areas, the more it has that contrast as well. So that's a good way to kind of adapt your painting if you want to. But I'm going to start with a really light yellow. So I'm scooping some of this white off to the side. And again, I'm trying to be more organized. So let's grab a little bit of yellow. And we'll have a light yellow here that we can access later if we want to. So something like that. We want to start with it really light because we will be darkening it up. And we want that contrast. So once you have that, let's go ahead and fill in close to the canyon here. Again, being really careful to press out with the brush there, fan out the hairs on the brush. And we want all the lines basically to go horizontally, okay? So the gradient from light to dark is all going to be pretty much done in stripes, okay? We don't want to actually see the stripes, but we want it to be light yellow, yellow, darker yellow, orange. So right now with this really light yellow, we're just touching down right here on the very lowest part of that sky. And we do have this smaller brush here. So use a smaller brush whenever you need to get into those areas. And if you happen to cover up some of the yellow, or some of the blue, excuse me, that's okay. We'll be going on top later with some other colors, and we can make adjustments to that. And we saved some of that light blue, so we can use that to touch it up if we need to. So we have our lightest yellow right in here. And now as we move up, we can add in more of our yellow. You can either mix it here or add it straight onto the canvas. If you're adding it straight onto the canvas, you might need to add some white as well, kind of alternate between them so that it's not getting too bright right away. And as we go up to the next section, we can outline the rest of the canyons here. And if you traced everything on here with a much darker thing like a pen or a Sharpie, you can go ahead and cover up the bighorn with the yellow to be able to keep those brush strokes nice and smooth, as long as you can still see them. If you can't see them, you're going to want to be careful to go around those edges. So if you did it in pencil like me, just try to go around the edges of the bighorn there. All right, and we want to bring this up all the way to the top then. And again, I'm keeping these brush strokes horizontal. Obviously, as I was tracing those, I broke that rule a little bit. But as long as the final brush stroke is horizontal, it's fine. Now I'm going to flip it again now that I've gotten through that section. Flipping your canvas is a really simple but super helpful trick sometimes. Okay, so we have that really light yellow here. What you guys might be finding on yours is that you have a bit of a stripe. If you have the really light, almost tan yellow, and then a more solid yellow up here, what you can do is kind of swirl them together. So pull some of that yellow down into the white, or the lighter section, and then go over with your horizontal brush strokes. Now as we get to the top here, let's go ahead and scoop up some of our solid yellow here. The warm yellow, just as it came out of the bottle. And let's add that to the very top. So again, contrast. We just want it to be as bright as possible. And you can do this the opposite if you would like to. If your really light yellow isn't quite as light as you would like it, go ahead and brighten it up with some white. And then once more, if this transition is too sharp, we can kind of swirl that yellow down into the lighter yellow. And then go back over with the horizontal brush strokes. So our painting is actually looking really close to, if you squint your eyes, it's looking very similar to that final one. And that's the beauty of doing color blocking like this, is that we get to do the entire painting and then just add more and more detail. Now we have one more thing to do in the sky before this dries, and that is to add in our warmest color, our orange here. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of it. Again, remember the rule of mixing, which is darker colors carry more weight. So the orange here is going to be a lot darker than the yellow, so we only need a little tiny dot. So get as much off as you can just to experiment, and then you can start to add more. And let's add this on the very top. So we added some in there. And then one more time, how we get rid of stripes. We can kind of swirl some of that orange down, bringing some of the orange down into the yellow, some of the yellow up into the orange. And then starting from the lighter area and working to the dark, we can go back to our horizontal brush strokes. And if that's not dark enough yet and you want it to be a darker orange, you can add a little bit more as well. I'll actually add a little touch more to mine. All right, brush in the water cup. We'll take a quick breather, a quick sip of tea. You can have a moment to share those stories about some park story, national, state park, even a city park. And the person with the coolest story will be the winner of our 15-minute painting at the end of this, which will be a sea turtle. I'd love to see how these paintings turn out for you guys. So if you are painting with some people at home, go ahead and snap a photo at the end and share that on our Facebook page at Creatively Uncorked on Facebook. We can see those photos there, and it's always cool to see how they turned out, see everybody's unique artistic style. I've got another park story for you guys. I was in Glacier National Park, and I was doing I believe it was an 11-mile hike with my family. So we were way out on the top, and we were not coming down for a long time. And if you guys have been to Glacier or hiked in mountains much, you know that you have the cliff on one side, the cliff on the other side going down, and a little tiny path to walk on. And there was a badger coming towards us on that path, like he owned the place. And badgers are very dangerous creatures. So we all jumped off to the side, the cliff going upside, pressed ourselves against it, and the badger just kind of walked on by. But it's pretty cool. All right, we have our base coats for everything now. Let's go ahead, and I'm trying to think, where's the best place to start? I was too focused on my story there. Let's start with the lighter areas, okay? And you can use either brush. I'm going to start with the filbert brush, but as you're watching it, if you think, oh, that's just too big of lines, that's what this one's for, okay? So on this furthest back canyon here, we have that light blue, but we want to start kind of jumping in with that Van Gogh style. So what we're doing is we're taking some white and we're adding a little bit of water to it. This is a cool trick in acrylic painting. Watering down a paint makes it semi-transparent. So we'll be able to see some of that blue through it, making what's really just a watered down white into a really light blue. Now with that, we're going to start adding in some shapes here. And what I found is best is to kind of outline the whole thing. But when I say outline, don't do it yet, because let me show you. And you know what? I'm going to want that smaller brush. But when I say outline, notice I don't get all the way up to the edge. I'm actually in just a little bit. All right, so we want these lines that kind of trace that surface. But they don't go all the way out to the edge. And we don't want it to be a perfect outline either. So one of the other things that we'll be doing is having some lines that come straight down. There'll be any variation of this. Straight down, starting to angle out, and totally flat, okay? So anywhere in that gradient is what we want with these lines. So right here, maybe I'll do a few that are just pulling straight down. And then we can have some that sort of squiggle and curve out. And we're just going to fill the whole mountain with that. So pick a section, like right there. So within that canyon, there's all these little tiny mountain areas. And then we're going to fill that with lines that kind of squiggle or pull straight down or start to bend off. And especially towards the bottom, they'll really start to level out. One of the keys to this is not to overthink it, which I know is an oxymoron. If I tell you not to overthink it and you're thinking about that. So we're just filling it with all these little squiggly white lines. Again, it's a watered down white though. So this is kind of a warm up to what we'll be doing in a moment. Because it's a little bit simpler in the back one because we're just doing it with one color. So let me zoom in on that for you guys. So I filled it with all these little squiggly white lines, really kind of channeling those shapes that I was talking about, of this cliff that's angling out and then flattening at the bottom. Now, the one final step with all of this is we don't want it to be too formulated like that, okay? If you want, you can even cover your eyes for this part, like cover your own eyes as you paint it. Because all we're going to do then is just add in a few more squiggles to messy it up so it doesn't look too geometric or anything. And don't overdo this. So you actually probably don't want to cover your eyes. That was more of a joke. I sometimes use the same voice for my jokes. So we're just scribbling into a few areas to make sure it's not too geometric, too formulated. So we still have what I was talking about, but they're not in every section there. So you can connect a few, you can thicken some of the lines, however you want to think about it. But we're just making those more messy. And now, if you're not sure if it's working, step back. If you still can't see it from a proper perspective, go ahead and squint your eyes a little bit. And it should feel like you're looking at these cliffs that are all kind of catching the light in different ways. They have all these jagged edges. If you can't see that quite yet, or maybe you got too carried away with the white, we saved that light blue, okay? So use that. That will be helpful for you. Now for these nearest two, I am going to mostly use my filbert brush, although a balance between both of them is fine as well. And I'm going to continue our theme of light to dark here and go ahead and start right here. Now, going through the Grand Canyon is a river. I believe it's the Colorado River. And it's kind of hiding down here at the bottom of all these cliffs. So what I was trying to do here is we're just seeing a little bit of it. And so in the river, again, going with that Van Gogh theme, the lines are going to be flowing. So think river and add these kind of flowy lines like that. And I'm adding this with the lightest blue, the same blue that we used way back here. Now the other thing that Van Gogh does is a little bit of a dotting kind of, he combines that with his curvy brush strokes. So feel free to kind of dab this brush on there as well. And we can even take a little bit of white. Don't overdo it with this. But adding in a little bit of white there before it dries can be really cool and help that whole area just kind of pop. All right, now we're moving on into this section. So we are going to use a few different colors in here. I'm going to start with that phthalo blue. It's the same one that we used here. We're just going to kind of dot this on, pull it down. Again, keeping those shapes. So it's either coming straight down, angling out a bit, or completely leveling out as it gets to that valley down there. And sometimes this can just start to feel a little bit too planned out. So get really squiggly. We're just adding some phthalo blue in there. Again, squint your eyes if you're not sure if it's working. It should just be creating this impression. Van Gogh was an impressionist of these canyons. I think we get too caught up with perfect realism sometimes. So right there we can feel some of that texture of that cliffside. All right. Now we can take a little bit of that light blue as well and just add in a few strokes of that. You'll see that some of the colors right now are going to start blending into each other. So taking a little bit of this light blue right on top after we did that phthalo blue, they might play off each other a little bit. We'll see what happens. And I'm going to mostly just create this one area that's a bit brighter. Maybe this is actually one area that's a bit closer than that. And so it's catching a little bit more light. And then we'll just squiggle in a few into a few other areas just to tie it all together. All right, so we're starting to see it a little bit now. Now, let's keep working with this section, okay? Before we move on to this one, we'll save all of our colors though. So this next one, we're going to create a few gray shades, blue-gray kind of colors. And this will take a little bit of experimenting maybe, okay? So we'll take that phthalo blue, or if you have a whole bunch of that really light blue, you can take that. Actually, I'll grab some of that. So we're adding some white to our phthalo blue. And then add the tiniest little dot of black. A little bit goes a long way. We want this to be subtle. We don't want the painting to switch too much to having a lot of black and gray in it. The blue is really what makes this a beautiful painting, in my opinion. It's my favorite color, so I'm biased. But we have this nice gray blue now. Now let's take this and go ahead and add it into there as well. Dotting it into the different sections, or pulling these kind of curvy lines going down. And one way to think about painting when we're doing monotone paintings like this, so the mountains right here are all blue. But one way to think about it is dividing colors. So if we go straight from the, we went straight from that mid-tone phthalo blue to the darker phthalo blue. Then we can mix some that are in between that. So we went from the medium all the way to the dark. Then we actually added a little bit of the lighter one. But then we can also take them and we can move them up and down if you visualize it that way. You can add in more white or more black, or a little bit of both and kind of just darken it. So whatever works to think about it that way for you, that's kind of how I picture it. So I'm trying to get all of our bases covered, and then you can kind of get more and more detailed and add in more specific colors in between those even more. If that just confused you, don't listen to that. We all have different tools for understanding things, and that's one that works for me. Now with this gray blue, let's go ahead and add in a little bit into here as well, since we have it out. So up here, the cliff lines are going to be going straight up and down mostly. Of course, even my straight lines are going to be a little bit wiggly. So now is not a time to be a perfectionist. And over here, we're going to have it get really dark, okay? So I'm just leaving that right now as it is. One important thing with each of these steps is to make sure we're not overdoing it and covering up all of the previous colors. The whole point of doing so many layers is that we will get to see how they all play off of each other. So do be mindful of that and find that perfect balance with each color. Now, let's go ahead and add more blue to that gray blue, and a little bit more black. So a much darker kind of navy blue. Maybe a little bit of a gray navy blue. And we'll do the same thing with that. We're going to add it in both of these. And now in this darker section, we can start to have a little bit more of that. We'll add some black in there too. And all of us on our paintings want different levels of detail. So if you at some point are like, that's it, that's exactly how I want it, I'm just going to keep going for a little bit, but by all means, stop when you feel like your painting's ready. Now, we have all of our colors kind of turning gray now, so I'm going to start with a new blue, okay? So I liked where we were going with those two different shades of gray blue. Let's go ahead and grab some fresh blue, pull it off to the side, and grab a little dot of black to add into there. So this one we just want to be a dark navy blue with no gray in it. And let's add a few dots of that in here, especially into what we think might be the darker areas. So right here, I'm trying to create a bit of a line right here where there's a nearer mountain and then a further one. So the further one is going to be a little bit more in shadow. And then we have this closer one here. And way down here at the bottom, it's going to be in shadow as well with that navy blue. And then kind of spread the shadow up, pulling that up into the rest of it. And we are going to do that over here now as well with our navy blue. And let's start over here in the darker area. And the harder you press on this brush, the thicker your brush stroke is going to get. So we can pick some areas, especially the closer we get to the corner here, because that means that the canyon is really close to us. We can have the brush strokes get even bigger. Now at this point, we probably all have slightly different things going on with us. Actually, quite a lot of different things going on, because we've been mixing all of our colors, and they're probably represented in our paintings in a lot of different levels, okay? So I'm going to keep explaining what I'll be doing with mine, but just keep in mind that yours might have very different colors going on. So adjust it as needed. And remember, we have that comment section. You can snap a photo and send it to me, and I can help you figure out what colors you might need in yours. But really try to look at it and see which areas need definition, whether they are too dark or too light. So right here, I think this whole section is just a little bit too dark in general. So I want to add in a little bit of this light blue just to brighten it up a little bit. And just into the brighter side here. And our paintings turn out different every time, and every artist does them differently. So mine is not going to turn out just like the one up there. And that's okay. Now, one color I want to add a little bit more of is actually basically what we had for our base coat in this section. I ran out of that one, so I've been forgetting to add it. But again, this is just a mid-tone phthalo blue plus white. And let's go ahead and add that right up here. This is a detail I really like how it turned out on the original, is this really light blue on the darkest one. And again, we're tracing that side, but again, I'm not getting all the way up against the edge. I think it looks really beautiful when we leave a little bit of that dark edge. And then we're just kind of tracing that out. So we have that curve going down, make it nice and rocky and uneven. And then just to help that fit there, we'll add in a few streaks of that in a few other places. Since we have that color, let's add that in this one as well. So any areas that got a little bit too dark, or where we want to make it look like there's a bit of an edge, we can add a bit more of that light. And we can add a little bit of this in the water for some variation. And I wasn't a big fan of how that was looking right there. It looked to me to be too solid of a line between the cliff there and the river. And we want this to be more impressionistic, if that's a word. So we're kind of smearing those lines. We don't want to clearly see the river there. Okay, now I'm going to bring the contrast all the way home now to solid black, okay? And this one we want to use very sparingly. And if you have a much lighter painting, you can just make this a darker navy blue now, okay? So if you feel like black is a bit too bold, start with a navy blue. But I'm taking some black paint, and again, starting with a very small amount. And I'm adding this in here. I want a little bit of definition here, where the cliffs are, or the edge of this cliff is. And this can be a really cool way to make your painting more interesting, adding some really bold black brush strokes in some of the lighter areas even. But then mostly we want them to be located right here, centered on this area, and then spreading out just a little ways. Now if you are feeling bold, we can add in a little bit of this into here as well. Not so much, we don't want to cover up the blue that we added in there. And now we're still going to add our yellow in just a moment for those final highlights on the cliff edge. But take one moment to see if there's any other colors you want to add in there on our spectrum of blue colors. So again, that can be all the way from really dark blue to a really light blue, but you can also take those colors and mix some gray tones of them, okay? Now, I'm going to give that a moment to dry, and while that is happening, I'm going to switch to my smallest brush. And with black or navy blue, I'm going to be using a really dark navy blue, almost black. We're going to fill in the Bighorn Sheep. If you're freehanding this, it's a bit difficult, but try to find the basic shapes in it. So it's two circles. We've got the circle right here for its backside. We have the circle right here in the front. And you can connect them with these nice, gently curving lines. And then we have the legs coming down. The front one is straight up and down. The back one is going to bend out and back in. The top half being thicker. So start with it bending out and back in, and then thicken up the top. Make sure you have a nice fine point on your brush for this and that you're not pressing too hard, or it'll be really hard to do details. And start small with it. If you're not sure if it's looking quite right, make sure that you finish it all the way first, and then we can make adjustments. If you need to rotate it, you know what, I'm going to keep it this way so you can see it the same direction. Now for the head here, we want it to be another small circle. And a little dot right there. He's looking down. And then just connect that nice and smooth. Add in the neck, really thin, and then thicken it up. And then, of course, it's a bighorn sheep. We need the big horn. That's where it gets its name. This just curves out straight back from the snout and just does a C shape, getting a little bit thinner as it comes in. And let's thicken up the neck just a little bit more. At least on mine I have to. There we go. And then if you need to make any touch-ups, now is the time to do that with the big horn. So if the horn needs to be a little bit thicker at the start, or the head needs to be any bigger, or oftentimes we get the legs too thin to begin with, all right, and there's that. Now, we have, oh, I almost forgot the birds. Let's do the birds so that we really give the canyon really a chance to dry all the way. Now, I did the birds in the mid-tone blue. You can do them in a darker blue or even black if you'd like. But I wanted to do the mid-tone blue so it doesn't draw quite as much attention to it. It's a little bit fainter. And again, you can rotate this if you'd like. Now birds, we just do, you can start with a dot, and it's just a parenthesis shape. I like the way the birds look with these canyons because they play off of that same shape, that gentle curve. Ooh, Lisa just shared a story. That is cool. She saw a mountain lion and a mountain goat at Glacier National Park. Wow. A mountain lion, that would be scary. I hope you didn't get too close to it, or it didn't get too close to you. One time my family was staying at a cabin and at the camp that we work at over the summer, and they put us in a cabin that we had never been at before, way out in the woods, and the counselors were driving us home every night, and we were really confused by why they were doing that. And we found out about halfway through the week that there's a mountain lion that lives really close. We were in its territory, and they were a little bit worried. Not so worried that they didn't want to put us there, but a little bit worried that it might attack us if we were walking on our own. So that's why they put us in the other cabin. But we heard it in the night. It was pretty scary. All right, now that this has all had a chance to dry, let's go ahead and switch to our filbert brush. And we're going to add these yellow highlights in there. So one thing that we do in art is or if you're working with color at least, or even black and white, it would just be a little bit different, is knowing where the light is coming from and how it plays off of the objects. So right here we have the light on the back there, and it's going to be caught on the sides that are facing that, and the back side here is a shadow. Pretty straightforward, but it is something to think about, and knowing those basic rules then opens up the door to start learning the more complex rules about bounced light and things like that. So, but the cool thing is that they're just rules that we actually experience every day. So as you're going about your daily life, just pay attention to what you're seeing and what you're really seeing, not what you think you're seeing. And you will learn all of those rules. Now, I'm just taking some really light yellow. So yellow plus white. Find a color you like. And I'm going to add this along the edge facing the sunset. In this filbert brush, we can really experiment with that swooping line. So we can press down harder and get it to be a little bit thicker, and then lift it up and it gets really thin there. You can experiment with not outlining it all the way to the edge. I think that can look really cool sometimes. So let me show you an example of that. Leaving some of that dark blue on the edge there. Can look really cool. Let me zoom in there so you guys can see that. So it's a really kind of subtle effect, but really it's one of the first things you notice on this painting. So it's only a small amount of yellow, but it goes a long way. We'll do the same on the other one here. Again, experimenting with line weight, meaning how hard we press on there, how thick that line is. And it's okay if it gets a little bit wild. Right here, I did a bit of a swirl. And then we can add a little bit in the water here, specifically in the lightest areas that you have. And that's something I kind of forgot to do first time through, but this water would almost definitely be getting a little bit of that yellow light. Water is very reflective. So adding a little bit there. And then we can take our orange. And this is something you only want to do in, let's say, less than 3 places, okay? I don't want to restrict you too much, but you don't want this orange to get too crazy. So adding in just a little bit. So I'm going to do it right there. Use your orange wisely. Maybe a little bit right there. And a little bit right there. That'll just kind of balance out our painting, bringing in some of that orange from the sky. But we don't want to get too carried away with it. Hope I didn't lose anybody yet. When you are ready, grab that white paint. And as a finishing touch, we're just going to lighten up that yellow one last time. So pick a few areas to add some white on top of. And the key is a few areas, okay? We don't want to add it on the entire thing. We want some of that yellow. But we want some white just to lighten it up a bit. So I chose to focus my white highlights on the center of the painting right here. So that part is a little bit brighter, and I don't have white highlights once we leave that center. And that is it for this painting. What's so cool though with this technique is we can really experiment with it some more, and we can keep layering it up. Acrylic paint really covers itself really nicely. So by all means, take some time to really figure out what you want to do with this. Darken up any areas that you think could use some darkening. Lighten up areas that you think could be lighter. Or just add more colors in there. So if you feel like you just have, you can see very clearly like 5 different shades of blue, add some more just to add some variation in there, make it a little bit more wild and free. But if you are all done with that, go ahead and sign it so that people know who did it. Find a good place on your wall or gift it to a friend. And now I'm going to do this quicker painting, 15-minute. And this is going to Lisa, most likely, unless somebody else has a story to share. And I'm just going to use the paint that I have left over. And by all means, if you have any questions, you can still use this time to ask them. I know maybe you were busy painting the whole time, so you weren't able to ask any questions. But if you have those now, I'd love to answer them. That's what I'm here for. So let's get started on this painting. So I'm going to start with a base coat here. It's a good way to start a painting. I'm just mixing a green. So I took some yellow, some blue, and a touch of white. And I'm just going to fill the shell here. I already sketched that out for myself. So we've got the shell. I used to have a pet turtle named Speedy. He wasn't. So we just want that to be nice and symmetrical there. I guess I can't turn my teaching mode off. I'm explaining what I'm doing even with this. By all means, feel free to follow along.
Are you watching the timer?
Yes, it is 8:05 when I started, we'll say. Now with base coats, I like to sometimes add just the slightest amount of shading to it. We'll see if that backfires for me as I'm trying to do this on restricted time. But making this shell look a little bit brighter in that center is really fun. Now let's add the head. And I have an idea here. Let's see if this works. I'm going to see if we can have this guy be turning and looking at us. One of my problems with painting is I never mix the right amount of any color. I never mix enough. So mixing more green for the third time already. And we have these flippers. And I normally like to start with those nice and small before we get big with them. Looks like this one might be doing a jumping jack. Let's, there we go, add in some variation. So now all the legs are going out exactly the same. All right, so we have a base coat on that. Let's go ahead and lighten up. Add a few highlights in there real quick. Oh my. Speed painting. Maybe it's not my thing. All right. It's a good challenge though. Now let's add in some cool blue designs. So we can start with the middle section. And turtles, if I remember right, they have kind of, you can see their spine through their shell. So that's why I'm starting with the spine there. Got my smaller brush. This is the perfect time for it. You know that song, Under Pressure? That's what I'm feeling. All right. Whoa. So the outside of their shells, they have this little rim kind of thing. If anybody has another park story or wants to share their painting with me, I'd love to see how those turned out or hear your story. And if you have any feedback from me whatsoever, I'd love to hear it. It's weird teaching people that you can't see or hear, so by all means, please. Now, one thing that being rushed does, and I kind of like it, is these lines. I'm less specific with them, and it can add a really cool style sometimes. I don't know what I'm doing with the head. Let's see. Let's see if I can pull it off. All right, he's got the eyes and the mouth. Not my best work. That's not negativity. I'm just pointing out a fact. And I'm adding in a little bit of yellow now.
We still have 6.5 minutes.
Okay, still got time. Trying to get all my bases covered. So one cool thing that I'm doing, and I'm sure there's some fancy art word for it that I don't know, but with the green, and a lot of us when we start out with art, we don't think of this, but since green is made up of blue and yellow, you don't have to shade it with just white and black. You can add highlights with the lighter color that makes it up, and we can add shadows with the darker color. So here that's yellow and blue, and they connect to make it green. Let's add a bit of that skin texture. All right, the face needs a little bit of work. Let's add highlights in the eyes. I'll darken up the smile a bit. This is not a anatomically correct turtle. Again, we're throwing realism aside. Let's see, what else do we need for our jumping jack turtle? Let's make it look like he's really swimming in that water. It's really flowing past him. So we'll add some, and again, we can water down our white. We can dot these on there. Just adding some texture. Let's add a bit of that with blue. It's coming together, you guys. It's coming together. 4 minutes. Awesome. I'm doing fine. And this is a pattern that I think a lot of us try, and it's kind of difficult to pull off and make it look good. And I think I'm figuring out the key is putting the lines all right next to each other. So instead of just making a messy white and blue and a whole bunch of lines, having the white and blue connected, I think is looking pretty cool. All right, let's up that contrast one last time. So we did do blue and yellow for the highlights, or blue for shadows, yellow for highlights. But let's even add a little bit brighter with some solid white. Actually, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow into it so that the eyes stand out still. So we have white plus yellow, and I'm just going to add these highlights even brighter on that shell. I'm just picking one side for each one to highlight. I probably didn't need to do it on the entire shell, but I did. So we're being nice and messy with that. 3 more minutes. Add a little bit of a highlight, let's see, on the top of the head here. And now let's add a bit of a shadow into this. And I'm just going to take some black and blue, so it's not all the way black, and just darken up our darkest areas now. So this is kind of turning out to be the darker side right here. All right, there it is. I have 2 more minutes. I don't know what else I'm going to add. Let's see. Let's add a few bubbles in here. So again, watered down white. And I probably should be using my smaller brush. With that watered down white, let's make some bubbles of various sizes. And then clean that out and take some really solid white and add highlights on them. Normally I'd let it dry before adding the highlights, but you cannot do that on a rushed painting. There we go. And that is it. Let me do one last thing. I'm going to take some of that blue and a little bit of white. That was a bad idea. That's how you learn. All right, I'm just touching that up with a bit of green, and we'll be done. I got 1 more minute. Okay. Mixing a little bit more of a light yellowy green, and let's add these little cheek highlights. Make them a little bit cuter. There we go. And there it is. Our sea turtle, done in 15 minutes. So, thank you guys for joining me for the painting tonight. It's been great seeing you, or not seeing you, but having you here with me. Also not here with me. There's so much irony to all of this. But thank you guys for tuning in tonight. If you enjoyed the painting, I would encourage you to check out our website at creativelyuncorked.com to see what else we have upcoming on the calendar. And don't forget to get your art kit to go, which will come with all of the materials that you'll need for that. And again, we're switching to Zoom. So if you would like to join these in the future, you will have to purchase a ticket, again, at our website. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and I will see you next time. Bye.